Good evening, sir.
Hi, Binayak. How are you?
I am fine, sir. Sir,
Fine.
we have Indrajit is one of the speakers
Okay.
today.
Hi, Sridhar. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Indrajit. Nice to
Indrajit
meet
is an
you.
XLRI alumni. He's
Okay.
from the 90,
Class of 99.
the
Yeah,
class of
99.
99 batch. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Good.
And Rajiv works with Voltas. He's a very active member of the NHRD forum. And he's also a very active member of the Gemba HR forum, which I run. And he's one of the regular attendees of all the sessions of conversations.
Okay.
Good evening, Sridhar.
Good evening.
Great.
So just waiting for the other speaker and some to join in,
Yes.
because since we
Okay.
record it, so we really do not focus on, because people come on joining in the middle of it also. So since
Okay.
it's recorded, we keep it that way.
Okay.
So on the topic, so the two major themes on the topic that we have today, one is, of course, the impact of candidate experience on employer brand, and which Kasturi, who will be joining in right now, she would be handling, and Indrajit would be handling on, with technology, what are the changes which is happening in the way candidates are going to interact with the organizations in future. So given these changing touch points, how relevant would candidate experience be in the employer band scenario?
Mhm.
So this is how we have done. Sir, I would start off with you, and I would ask you to give us a perspective on first employer brand itself, and of course, what your experience about candidate experiences.
Yeah.
Will that be fine, sir?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Binayak.
Great.
Yeah. So,
So once Kasturi joins in, we will start off.
yeah.
Sure.
So I think the notion or the idea of employer brand, at least in the Indian context, came into being much later, because prior to 1990, we were a closed economy, and the choices that were available to people were limited. So to the extent that people uh, had very clear notions, that some people were very clear that they have to join the government service. Some people were very clear that they have to join public sector units. And very few people were keen on, and whatever brand image the government organizations had, or public sector units had, we are not sure. But security of employment was considered to be the most important driver. And therefore, plenty of people chose to operate in PSUs or work for PSUs and government organizations. And the few private organizations that were there, they had uh, no difficulty in getting the kind of people that they wanted. In fact, uh, even places like IITs and IIMs, people were available in plenty when companies like ITC went, or uh, Hindustan Lever went, and so on and so forth. So the notion of brand, employer brand, I think came into being once you had the economy opening up in the 90s. And you had a lot of multinational companies coming into India, especially the fast-moving consumer goods companies, as well as some financial services companies. And they uh, uh, had already built up an image which was there. And therefore, when they came in the 90s, early 90s, many people, especially in the campuses, as well as people who are already working in government or private organizations, they said that they will go to these companies which enjoyed a brand image. Now, what those elements were, I think probably the first one was essentially the getting ahead kind of an image. That if you joined a company which is a multinational, so there was plenty of promise of you getting ahead. Now, getting ahead meant you got a lot of recognition for the kind of expertise and the kind of jobs that you did. And secondly, you also got ahead or went ahead in terms of the remuneration, the money that you would get, so that is in terms of status and the money, the perks and other things that you enjoyed. And you also felt that you could work with some of the finest minds in terms of leadership and subject matter expertise and so on and so forth. So it was a question of getting ahead, getting along, or working with people who had a tremendous reputation for their expertise, and finally the question of money and perks and so on and so forth. So it was around these three elements of getting ahead, which is recognition, etc., etc., getting along, which is working with fine minds and good people, good teams, and the kind of remuneration and perks, etc., which is basically the commercial value, your own commercial value. So these three elements came together to inform an employer brand. But many companies were struggling, including ITC. I'm quoting ITC because that's the only company I worked for. And we were not sure how to get these three things right. And okay, it's not that all three are equally important for the employee, but all three have to be there to a reasonable extent. Without you can't say that I'll have two of three or one of three and get by. So I think that is when the race started. Employer branding as an activity or as an initiative came into being, because you were for a set of people which was limited in number, or which is limited in number even today. And therefore, what should I do to make sure that employees grow, employees develop, they get recognized? What should I do so that they work with the best minds? What should I do to give them the best remuneration and perks? So that's briefly the kind of picture that I hold about employer brand.
That's wonderful, sir. That's a very good explanation on what employer brand is, very lucidly done. Just to add, I think the working with fine minds was perhaps one of the drivers which I, as a candidate, that was the choice was made that yes, I will join ITC. Of course, there were other reasons, but I think the interviews with Mr. Ajit Mullah, Mr. Praveen Dwivedi, and Mr. Robinson Gupta actually was a clincher.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So that was Dr. Sridhar, ex-CHRO of ITC. He explained to us on the concept of employer brand. Now I will move to our speakers for today. Kasturi, I start off with you. So Kasturi has been in the talent acquisition and talent management part of HR for a very long time, spanning over industries like retail, FMCG. Currently, she is the lead of talent acquisition and talent management in Exide Industries. I also have with me Indrajit, who after an extensive, he's my alumni from XLRI, after an extensive career spanning in India and abroad. He has now currently started his own firm, which he co-created with people. So he's now is the partner of Encore Mindseek. So my first question to you, Kasturi, is that you have worked also on creating employment EVPs. I remember you working very hard, very diligently on the EVP concept in Imami. And so candidates, when they come into the organization for an interview or for any selection process, it is always the first impression which is the lasting impression. Now, what do you see? How do you see the linkage of how we treat candidates and their experience when they uh, come into the organization? What is the impact on the employer brand or on the employer value proposition?
Well, first of all, let me wish all of you a very good evening. Special good evening to Sridhar sir here.
Yeah.
This is
Thank you.
a very, very welcome surprise. Thank you so much for being with us today. Your learned experiences over the years would add a lot of value to this conversations. And thanks, Binayak, for creating this platform for like-minded people within the fraternity to join and share their views. So going
Thank you.
back to the question that you had, see, very frankly speaking, the candidates today are very well informed. It's not like days way back, years back, when it was only the job which mattered. As Sridhar sir mentioned, there are multiple aspects that a candidate look at while he or she takes up a job decision, and it's more of a career move than a job change for most of the candidates. Now, in such a circumstance, the the first person who gets in touch with the candidate is your talent acquisition person, right? So a talent acquisition person is the brand, the employer to the candidate, be it a very well known brand like an ITC or an HUL or any other big shots, or a very small organization, mid-sized organization who are trying to establish their footprints. Under all circumstances, it is the TA person from the team who is the first spokesperson for that particular organization, that employer brand, to the external candidate. So it is extremely critical that in the very first conversation that you have, in the very first engagement that you have with the candidate, you lay down the foundation. And to lay down the foundation, it is important to have very detailed understanding of both the job proposition that you are offering to the candidate, and of course understanding whatever basic information that you have from the candidate's profile, who's been shared with you by some consultant or sourced by you from any other say particular source. So if you have both the pieces ready, if that preparedness is there, only then you can engage into a conversation with the candidate, which will in the longer run give you benefits which might or might not convert into a candidate becoming an employee. But irrespective of that fact, I believe it has a very, very long lasting effect, specifically establishing your employer brand to the talent market.
Okay. So, so if I may ask, so one is of course the touch point where the TA person gets in touch with the candidate. Now, the candidate experience is not limited to that first conversation.
Absolutely.
Over the time, you will be having separate conversations. They would come meet people. One major challenge which I faced and a major point of concern where I had always had uh, some degree of a was keeping candidates waiting. That used to be that in certain cases I found in India it was like uh, the person has come, okay, let him wait. We will take the interview whenever we feel like. So that was something which actually, as a candidate, course, as a candidate, when I experienced it, it was really something which I did not like. And similarly, when I was also taking care of talent acquisition, and I had a senior person who's supposed to take the interview, but the candidate is waiting for a long time. That used to be a big challenge. So these small things, apart from, of course, what you said is laying down the foundation by the TA team, what are these small touch points which are there, which we should be very careful about, and which we should have that empathy to understand from the perspective of the candidate, that how the person would feel if he or she would be in that situation. What are these touch points?
Sure. In my opinion, it is bits and pieces of every small experience that you give to the candidate over a period of time that you establish your employer brand. Okay.
Right.
And as you rightly mentioned, these small touch points, they are largely taken for granted, very unfortunately, by not only the line functions, because this is a secondary task for them, but many a times, unfortunately, even by our own people, the people into the HR team. So I would share with one of my associations with the Aditya Birla group. I came across a very fine proposition of ensuring that candidates specifically do not wait for a period which is defined, maybe a 15 minutes or a 20 minutes defined, and that was actually diligently audited by a committee which was called a people committee by the organization then. And it really had a great impact, a kind of a monitoring session by the seniors on the junior recruiters, and that really helped. But of course, it is a matter of discipline which has to be built upon by everyone into the organization. So let us first understand that recruitment or getting the right candidate on board is maybe the primary duty of your talent acquisition team, but there is a lot of partnering which happens with a lot of other departments across, right? So every department has to put in their best efforts to ensure that we say the same language, we speak the same language, we give the same picture about the organization to the external talent market. Now, see, there would be certain, if I talk about very real time experiences, we all would have gone through this in in our journey of scheduling interviews, that there are last minute changes, there are last minute engagement discussions which happen, which is definitely not the desired situation. So of course it is ideal that we have our calendars blocked at a much earlier stage so that the candidate has enough time to plan his interview. Yeah, but having said that, under real time circumstances, last minute rescheduling of interviews, canceling of interviews happen very often, and there are certain times where it is beyond the control of the person who is directly liaising with the candidate. So under such a situation, I think a bit of, you know uh, how you actually put forward this particular unwanted situation in front of the candidate, the way you communicate that to the candidate makes a lot of difference. So if you're blunt and if you mention that, we're rescheduling the interview to so and so date, and you hung up the phone, or maybe you drop an email, you just change the calendar, that is one way. The second is you pick up the phone, you spend about 5-10 minutes with the candidate, you are apologetic in nature, you explain to him that why this last minute change has happened, and then you make a damage control. This damage control also helps to build your employer brand to a large extent, and it is a conscious effort that each one of us have to take in our own capacities to ensure that we send the right message to the candidate. And as I mentioned, it is a matter of discipline. If you start practicing it, it will get imbibed into the culture of the organization. And that is what is the most ideal thing to happen across organizations, irrespective levels, because you cannot take a fresher for granted, right? And you cannot be extremely particular about timings when you are into leadership hiring,
Mhm.
because these differences happen. But ideally, it shouldn't happen. One point I would like to mention here, because I see a lot of people, I mean, all the people who are here in this conversation are people within the fraternity. So, I believe at one point in time, if the talent acquisition person who is liaising or who is mediating or coordinating between the candidate and the hiring manager, who could be a technical manager per se, anybody from the functional team, if that HR person is able to sensitize that manager on the importance of maintaining this decorum, I think it adds a lot of value to the entire process of recruitment. So if your line manager has a regular habit of doing this as a practice, so you can always you can always put your foot down and say in a very humble manner, or the way it works in your organization, because every organization has its own way of operations, right? So dependent on the culture and the way it works in that particular organization, you can always put your foot down and say, sir or ma'am, this is not possible, please arrange your calendar. Or if you have accommodated it for the first time, you can sweetly mention that this would not be accommodated for the next time, and we might lose on the candidate. So the ball moves on to the court of the interviewer, then into the line function. These are small tricks which we can play. But if we nod our head to everything that the line function has to say about scheduling interviews, as I mentioned, that they are it is only a part of their job and not their core work, maybe in that situation, a bit of discussion with your line function, explaining the nuances, the pros and cons of, there is no pros, of course, there are all the cons of uh, you know uh, rescheduling interviews multiple times. I think sensible people, at least 80% of your stakeholders, would be kind enough to not repeat this on a regular basis, until and unless there are extreme business emergencies, which any point in time we would also have to accommodate. So
And
it's a
which
two-way
obviously the damage
process.
management has to be done. Very
Absolutely.
interesting. So, Indrajit, I have a question now. From what Kasturi has said, in fact, this question like to ask you and also to Mrs. Sridhar. Now, what is candidate experience? Is it a hygiene factor that if we don't give a good experience, we will lose a candidate, or it's a wow factor, a motivating factor that if I give a good candidate experience, I have a chance of recruiting. So, Indrajit, you can go first, and then I will come back to Mrs. Sridhar, Dr. Sridhar on that. You're on mute. Indrajit, you're on mute.
So, Binayak, thanks so much for having me this evening. It's a pleasure to be here in such great company, having people from the HR fraternity, senior people like Sridhar. It's fabulous, right? So, on your question, I have a take on this, and so Kasturi went before me and said that the candidate's first point of contact is the talent acquisition person, the recruiter, or whoever in the company. So, since you asked me to bring in the tech aspect of the candidate's experience and employer branding and all that, so I'd put it in a different way. Actually, the candidate comes into contact with the company long before the candidate meets the talent acquisition person, in a way, because the company's brand, if the company has that kind of a brand, is actually out there, right? And so the question is, out there where, right? So it's out there in the digital ecosystem. And if you look at it, uh, these days, it's something which cuts across gens, right? So if you're looking at a Gen X person, if you're looking at an alpha, they're all dwelling in the digital space, and that's where they communicate, right? So uh, that's where employers must begin the candidate experience, right? And in fact, nowadays they can do it, obviously, because of the reach of technology and other sorts of media. Now, I'd like to give you guys a bit of a perspective from the consulting side, right? So this is what I do these days. I was a HR practitioner before, but now a consultant. And my experience has been that, you know, in the minds of a lot of the clients that I work with, candidate experience and employer branding is a very nebulous thing. You know, I've been on the other side of the table also. Sometimes you just can't get your hand on it. You know, what, what, what does it distill into? You know, what is it actually? Is it the TA person? Is it, you know, how you are making things happen on LinkedIn, on your career page, right? Um, is it, you know, how you're interacting with your alumni, right? How you're holding events and stuff like that? What is it actually? So what's been happening, what I've been seeing is a lot of the focus of you know, companies who want to get into into employer branding, and that is of course a very leadership driven thing if it's happening seriously. You know, a lot of companies will have a small unit doing employer branding, but unless you really have the CEO, his direct reports, the frontline manager, all of them kind of singing in unison, it does not actually bring about that impact onto the candidate, right? Um, you'd ask me why. I'd say that, you know, we can flip back to tech again, right? So there are literally, so say you're a client and you have a Glassdoor page, right? A lot of the reviewers will be coming onto the page and interacting with CEO scores. They'll be looking at your projects, your business, you know, the kind of culture, which is another huge word, right? When it comes to employer branding that your organization has, you know, and to look at the newer generations, they get into specifics. So it's like a job shop, right? So I'm this guy. So I'm not going from one job to another, right? I'm going from one brand to another. So just like shopping for any other, you know, product or brand or whatever, I go on to these tech hubs and I shop for the job, right? So from the tech aspect, I feel that's where your TA guys, in conjunction with maybe brand marketing uh, and your IT and digital team, show your TA face, your company culture, your leadership approach, your business views, your ESG, you know, initiatives, whatever, you place it there, right? So coming back to Binayak's question, candidate experience begins from here. There are a lot of electronic, you know, platforms and ways to do it. But I mean, the the I would say the crux of the matter is two streams. One, bring in more than just HR thinking. Bring in a brand marketing kind of thinking to improve the candidate experience. Also, you know, have something of a CRM kind of a mindset. A lot of firms are doing it nowadays, and I'm also working with a lot of these firms to bring in that kind of thinking. So in our employer branding and analytics team, we actually have a stats guy, right, who's a part of our consulting team and who is working with us not only to look at you know, data inputs on the market brand, how to improve brand reach, uh, to do the analytics and come back on various brand aspects and stuff like that. So that's where, you know, the tech is coming in, the multidisciplinary thinking is coming in. And all that is kind of, dovetailing into providing the candidate a very, very unique kind of experience where the person is actually, you know, his existence in the organization can be simulated outside. He kind of gets a feel of what it's like to be out there, and it better be what you're projecting it to be, right? Otherwise, you lose NPS, right? So then people start disconnecting from you. So this would be my take on it, Binayak. Looking at the experience and also looking at how branding and tech-related thinking is going on with in this area.
So if I may, if I heard you right, it is like there are a lot of opportunities in which I can make it a motivator, and the interaction actually begins much ahead of anyone getting TA team getting connecting, because the people are also reviewing Glassdoor and various other sites which are there to understand about organization. Therefore, you need to be present there. You need to have a right
Yes,
message, a right uh, brand visibility there. But
yes,
what I also hear you is that the brand visibility has to be genuine, because unless you
yes,
have that, because you don't control on who's writing on a glass door or anything, and if
yes,
you have a visibility which is portrayed by the organization, but there's a dissonance, as in the actual thing is not like that, then this can become a critical
yeah.
factor, because people
So
will have this problem. Yeah.
exactly. So Vinayak, I put it like this. So for successful candidate impact, right? Uh, an organization has got to have a solid brand strategy, right? That's where it's all going to kind of flow and connect onto the experience. Now, there are many things you can do. So there are words like storytelling, for example, right? So how do you translate your organizational stories into tech? I mean, you can do it with bots talking to you and interacting with you. That's a tech aspect. You can, there are many case studies. For example, GE did this women in engineering kind of a employer brand campaign, okay, which was very, very impactful, because with that video of a lady engineer there talking about her career transitions and her career experiences within GE, uh, it kind of went viral, putting it in tech language, right? And it had immense impact, this storytelling aspect. So the leadership's vision, the leadership's, culture points or whatever culture markers, what your organization is really like, putting this vision onto different platforms. Okay, it could be emailers, it could be tech platforms, LinkedIn, social media. Uh, Nowadays, you have, products. I kind of jotted them down because very honestly, even they're so evolving. Even I don't know most of their names, right? So, for example, I'll give you guys. Okay. So, have you heard of this company called Martech? So, Martech is a AI-based software company working on people experiences and employer branding. Okay. So what they do is just like an app, right? It's just like an ATS. You could picturize it like that. You install it on your company's systems. It's doing everything from reaching out into social media, um, gathering data from various sources, telling you where your brand stands, giving you various kinds of cuts on various aspects of your brand. Could be leadership, could be culture, could be remuneration, could be whatever, social impact and stuff like that. So you have another company called Linked Humans. Have you guys heard of this company? So this is another new company coming up, doing stuff like speciality benchmarking when it comes to employer branding. So they are taking your employer brand, they're taking your data, right, and they're comparing it with data uh, of your competitors and giving you a picture as to what your candidate experience could be like vis-a-vis your competitors, right? So you have other companies like Rally Insight, Social Cedar, which are more into the employer brand data analytics part. So in in other words, a lot happening around this area now.
Great. So, sir, Dr. Sridhar, now, the question was basically on whether it is a hygiene factor or a motivating factor. So I think from Indrajit says that given that there is a lot of interest in it, it is, I think, beyond the hygiene part only. It is also something which you can actually leverage and motivate people to join you, create a brand attraction by projecting some of the experiences that employees are having to your candidates. So what is your thought on this? That is it a hygiene or a motivating factor?
No, certainly. I think the whole, when you look at the entire people aspect, there is no company which says or which doesn't say that people are very important. Okay. Now, having said that, in the Indian context, okay, because there is so much of supply and restricted demand, so like many things, it is more a platitude. It's a good thing to say, but I may not implement it in full in my organization. So now the question is, I would like to, the points that Kasturi raised, as to people not giving time, which is something that in ITC, all of us have been through. And I don't think, at least during my tenure, I can say that the candidate experience has been of a very high order. In fact, there have been days or times when the candidate experience has been abysmally poor. Now, having said that, now thinking back, I think we in HR or the organization itself, I'm saying, we have not been able to put the fact that people are very important in a compelling way to all the people in the organization. What I mean by that is, recruitment and selection is seen as an HR activity, and as Kasturi mentioned, that it is a secondary activity or it's an additional activity for some other function. Now, but it's not so, and therefore, I think, and that's where I agree that it's a leadership exercise. Right from the senior most person, the CEO, down to the last person in the organization, should consider that people are important, notwithstanding the fact that there is an oversupply in the Indian context. Now, this is again true when you flip the side, which he mentioned, the previous speaker,
Indrajit.
I didn't get his name.
Indrajit.
Indrajit, that the customer relationship. Now, I find that, we are still, many of us, many companies in India are still in the pre-1990 era. What I mean by that is, even when it comes to customers who are, I mean, it's debatable whether a customer is more important or an employee is more important, but let's say they are equally important. And now, I don't know how many companies give the customer a good experience. Okay. Now, whether it is by way of, the product itself in terms of quality or whatever promises they make. So the brand that they are talking about, the customer-facing brand, whether it's product or service or whatever, I'm not sure whether they are concerned about that. Now, because pre-1990, you had very little competition, and whatever you produced got sold. however bad or poor it was. So the same mindset was there as far as employees are concerned. And I don't think we have come out of that mindset. I don't think we have come out of that mindset. Whether you take airlines, whether you take hotels, whether you take consumer durables, uh, things which are of some value, not discussing the fast-moving consumer goods, which probably is another topic. But anyway you go, I don't know whether you can say that I had a good experience with that airline or I had a good experience in that hotel. Okay, very rarely, unless you are flying some first class or you are, getting into a 5-star hotel or something like that. So now, how do we change this? Now, that's the question. So therefore, I think there is a lot that we need to learn and probably get educated on about business. Who is important? What should we do? And unless this happens, when we look at business as competitive, as something that needs to grow, as something that is dependent on the customer and the employee, we will continue to fight the battles that Kasturi mentioned. So candidates will keep waiting till 9 in the night, or you may call them and say that, after they have come to the office, that the interviews are cancelled because the boss is busy or something like that. So unless there is a mindset change, in terms of looking at every customer as an important person in the organization's life, similarly, every employee or a prospective employee is an important person, we are fighting a losing battle. Why these companies are still existing? Because of the oversupply. Now, take, for example, some skills which are in short supply. Today, everyone is after data. I think Indrajit is talking about that. So everyone wants data analysts, data specialists, AI analysts, and so on and so forth. Now, these people are, somewhat esoteric and difficult. So probably companies will lay out the red carpet for them. But companies will not be so bothered about, others who are available probably in plenty. But unless we change our mindsets to consider everyone important, the employee and the customer, we are fighting a losing battle. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not sure what happens abroad. But now the question that I ask is, why isn't there many companies of Indian origin on the world's best employer list? Or why aren't many companies of Indian origin on the companies with which post sustainable profits and sustainable growth year after year? You don't find, I don't know, but we may be in 200 rank or 300 rank, maybe 1 or 2 companies, but there are millions of companies in India of Indian origin, big, medium, small, etc., etc. But none of them claim to be on that list for whatever it's worth. So my question is why? I think the reason why is because we disrespect both the customer and the employee. So even if Kasturi succeeds in convincing her company, or Indrajit convinces his companies, the companies he's consulting, to do something, to improve the experience. Now the question is, will it be sustained? Or will it be some kind of a drive, like you have vigilance drive or, ticketless travel drive and so on and so forth, or the traffic police standing and catching people who are violating traffic norms. So that's a drive, but it doesn't basically change our mindset. We will break traffic rules. We will, if possible, travel ticketless and so on and so forth. So I think, how do we bring about this mindset change, which is sustainable? That's been the big question that we had in ITC, because the problems that you were narrating, Kasturi, were or the issues were very, very, very much there in ITC, and we were going through hell on that count. The only change that happened in the last years of my tenure was that when senior level appointments were happening, the CEO himself was driving that exercise. So the dates, the time given for candidate, the reception, etc., was done in an order. Now, let me go back to the time when I joined ITC, 1982. Now, then at that time, it was a 3-day selection process, not 1 hour or half an hour, 3 days. And you can never forget that 3 days, because it was conducted by people who understood what has to be done, who understood what was at stake. That, ITC's name, reputation, etc. So they went about it in a manner that was exemplary. But post, say 90s or even 2000, when actually the war for talent became extremely intensive, we let go of all the nice things that we were doing, which was probably helping us in a big way. It's actually a contradiction, or, so we should have upped the way we were doing recruitment and selection and all other people management practices to a higher level, because now competition is more. In the 80s and 70s, competition was less, but you were doing an impeccable job. So my own view is that I think there's a lot of it's almost like putting out fires. And now you can't keep putting out fires every day. There should be no fire to begin with. I mean, if at all there is one, it should be exceptional. So like you acquire customers, you keep customers, if you're doing that activity properly, you will have a process, you will have a system. Now that process and system must be suitably tailored for employees as well. Because even if the lifelong career is not there in today's world, that people don't stay on in one company forever, even if they stay for 1 year, 2 years, whatever it is, can you give from start to finish an experience that is unforgettable as far as that person is concerned? I think that is a lot of hard work. More than hard work, it is a lot of change, mindset change, that we need to bring about. Because if we don't do that, whatever we are doing will be very temporary, very, what should we call, short term. And we will again go back to the same bad ways.
Sustained. That is a challenge.
Yeah.
Here I have another thought. Now, as you said, that when you joined ITC, the process which was there was exemplary.
Yeah.
And slowly over time that got diluted. So what was the reason? Was it the efficiency, doing it fast, doing it on time? Was that the pressure which led to this? Or what exactly was the reason that an absolutely good system was dismantled and something else came in?
See, I think, Binayak, the answer to that question is, one, of course, the competitive pressures on the business increased compared to what it was before. So therefore, people were finding it difficult to, sort of manage many things. That certainly was there, but is that a reason? Is that a? But I would say no. It's only an excuse, because two or three things probably would be the reasons. One is we, as a team, as a management team, we failed to prioritize. So when you have competitive pressure, or when you have competitive pressure, your time is limited, and therefore you have to prioritize what is more important than something else. So I would say that the ability to prioritize, or the intelligence to prioritize was not there. So a production person, if it was recruitment of, let's say, engineers for the production department, the production person was under pressure to ensure that the shop floor was working without any hassles. And therefore he said that, let me complete all the issues on the shop floor, then I'll come for the interviews, which will be, 3-4 hours late than the appointed time. Whereas if the priorities were, now I have given this date and I've given the day, the time, and I must be there. Let production suffer. It doesn't matter. I'll have to find a solution for that separately. I can't mix up the two, that I have to find a solution today for the production problem. Therefore, I'm not able to come on time for the interviews. So I think it's a question of prioritization. One. Second is also the belief that, people, okay, we know we can do a selection. We don't have to be very rigorous about it. We have masters when it comes to selection. So 5 minutes, instead of having a half an hour interview, in 5 minutes, I can say whether the person is good enough or not. So some kind of a overconfidence, or that kind of a belief. And the second is, if the person is really interested, the candidate is really interested in a job, he should wait.
So let's see how committed he is.
Yeah. So if he is in a hurry, then tough luck to that person. Or is she in a hurry? So it's a combination of various things, like one, increased supply, lack of prioritization. Okay, I know best. I don't have to go through any structured interviews, and spend the time, the required time on the selection. I can look at a person and decide whether he or she is good enough or not. So there are many factors that come in, but all of these, I think, fundamentally stem from the belief that, or the lack of belief that people are important.
So here's, you absolutely.
So that is why I see that, if you see the exits that are happening, exits, and a kind of roaring business that engagement consultants are doing, employee engagement consultants. Now, it is like, hospitals and doctors having a field time. Hospitals and doctors should not have a field time. There should be preventive medicine, so that, your hospitals are not full and your doctors are not busy. So today what is happening is, we have engagement consultants very busy, telling you what you should do to engage your employees. One, how to reduce turnover of employees, and so on and so forth. All this is stemming because you start off wrong, and then you try to correct what is going wrong thereafter. Because if you start off wrong, it will continue to go wrong, however much you try and whatever you try. So that, I think, is, how do I prevent something going wrong with employees, or how do I prevent something going wrong with customers? That is the mindset that I think the preventive instead of reactive or post evaluation and actions. I think that change is required.
So,
and only that, we keep blaming that, that labor laws are coming in the way. That is why industrialization is not happening, etc., etc. But we don't want to exercise discipline and do it.
right, that is sure. So, is it then that out of the resources of production, somewhere we have not been able to understand the value of people as a production resource, and therefore other resources like finance, other resources like technology are topics which people feel or which business leaders feel are more important than people. Is that a concern? That is finance, the financing, the technology, uh, the market scenario, these topics are of more importance than people. This is another question which it's related, is not directly to recruitment. Another thing which I said that is how much time do leaders actually spend in the development of their subordinates, of their teammates? If I look at it, if I said that formal engagement on, say, a performance appraisal process, very few people would be say that on a regular frequency there was feedback being given, there was a genuine way from the uh, leader to develop me. Most of the cases, that's something actually rarity. If that happens, you feel that you're lucky. But most cases, the formal discussion on performance is also something which is in the entire span of the year or the performance period. I think it will be a negligible 1 or 2%, even less than that, that a leader would spend on basically the time that he gives on the development of his team. So is that concern, is that in India, or we have not been able to project people as the most important resource to our management team? Is there something in terms of the way we have projected uh, management education, is that other things, which is a very technical number driven, not only technical number driven, but other resources have found more importance? What is your thought on that? Do we really feel that people are not very important, even though we, of course, state that people are most important resource? But as managers, do we really believe that people are the most important resource?
So Binayak, if I can take that,
Yeah.
So I I completely agree with Sridhar on this socio-economic backdrop playing a mindset playing a very important kind of role in this phenomena, right? Um, that that people aren't at the top of your mind, right? In many a leadership boardroom or where important decisions are being taken, you would see that people always comes up as the last presentation, right? And we've all seen that, right, in our careers. So as I interact with different organizations, very honestly, across industry, in our country specifically, this thing cuts across. The undervaluation of human resources. If you can put it about people who claim to be crazy about people and are actually crazy about it, right?
Okay, that is one. I think another point which comes in.
There's a second category where we change it, right? So the question is how do we combat this, right? How do we change this particular
I think we lost you, Indrajit. Yeah, I think there's some problem with his connection. Uh, I just wanted to just put on this a recent thing which came up during this Euro 24. Germany has very stringent labor laws, and therefore
Yamal.
adolescent people are not supposed to work after a particular time or something. So this Spanish forward, the star Yamale or someone
Yamal.
Yamal, had to be taken off because the time was actually falling in a time when an adolescent person cannot work. So that is the level of it's labor law, and they're playing for their country. It's a big event, but even there, that is a thing which the coach of the Spanish team had to keep in mind, that I will get into a scenario where I will be actually going against the law if this player, which is who's 16 years old, plays beyond this particular time. So that is the level of importance which is accorded in, if I look outside. And there are several other ways in Germany, even in the IT sector, there are certain limitations on how overtime which can be done. And there was a person whom I know who works there, and she actually said that this is something which I can't imagine in India. In India, it is expected everyone will work as late as possible. But there, if I'm working late, my supervisor comes and says that you have to stop working late. You have to take at least so many days where you cannot work late, because that is something not only mandated by the law, but that is also what we feel is important for your mental and physical health. So that is the level of concern that we see in, the example was Germany. Both examples were from Germany. So why don't we have, is it because of the oversupply? Because Germany, I think the big challenge is they are a undersupply economy, where getting manpower itself is a difficult thing. You have to go maybe outside the country to get your manpower. Is that the only reason? Or is it something to do with the basic mindset that Indians have and Europeans have? Is the feudalism, is it something which is still existent in the Indian mindset?
Yeah, there is. I mean, if I may answer this question, yes, there
Yeah.
are some, what do you call, cultural differences. They say Asian people in Asia, uh, more so people in India, etc., or subcontinent. They are more docile and they respect authority and they don't question. Uh, Duty is more important than right, and so on and so forth. That is probably one of the reasons why we went through a period of militant trade unionism, because uh, unions were telling them that all the time, let us not talk about duties, let us also talk about rights, or let's only talk about rights.
Hmm.
Having
It is
said
other
that,
extreme,
yeah, having said that, I think uh, the respect aspect uh, was not completely missing even in the days gone by. People respected others, and today uh, you hear of so many managers or so many incidents in the organizations where there is abusive behavior, and both physical and verbal, and that was there, but I don't think it was up to that extent. And second thing is, the person who engages in that kind of a behavior, who doesn't treat human beings as they are, in the past, they compensated for that. They may be abusive or they may be harsh, but they did something else or something more which compensated for that. So people said, yeah, that person will be harsh, but whatever he does good things for me, or she does good things for me.
the very paternalistic
They,
leadership.
Yeah. So there was a combination, like people were short-tempered, but they also compensate. Today, I hear that there are more only short tempers there, but there's no compensatory mechanism. And in fact, uh, yes, compensation is an important part of why people leave or why people join. But on a day-to-day basis, I think uh, it is the experience with the boss, it is the experience with the other team members that gets people to leave. And I'm saying this not only in business organizations, but I'm seeing it in non-business organizations as well. If you go to an academic institution, you know, the way the head of the institution handles his or her people, and the way the team members interact with each other, all these are important reasons why a teacher or a professor leaves one institution. And so that is why I'm getting convinced that that we are not getting the mindset right. Uh, because to give an example, uh, in the academic institution, I'm saying that when you say, why are you treating that person so badly, that the person, the teacher, he or she is a good teacher. So the response from the head of the institution is that there are teachers dime a dozen. Like casual labor, they stand at the door, at the gate in the morning. So I am not bothered. So if this is the mindset of academic institution towards a good teacher, because the point that you made, why are we taking things for granted? Maybe there's an oversupply. Okay. But then the problem is that the oversupply is only in numbers. It's not in quality. Whether you take an accountant, or whether you take an engineer or a teacher or a doctor or an engineer, the numbers are there, but I am not sure whether you have the quality.
No, that is absolutely
ability.
not there. Otherwise, this entire concept, why are organizations spending so much on this talent war? Why are we looking at talent?
Yes.
Because there is a scarcity. The numbers of engineers may be there, number of people with the qualification may be there, but how many of them are actually effective in the work scenario? That is something which is a big question.
So therefore, what is happening is, let's say the numbers may be 1,000, but probably the people who are able to do the job are probably say 200, and you are looking at 1,000 and basing your actions, but actually you should be looking at 200 and basing your actions. And therefore, the point that Indrajit and Kasturi made, that you have to be very careful with every step that you take, whether it is the interview, or whether it is the the experience that you provide the employee on the first day, etc., etc.
I think one more perspective that I would like to add here would be specifically in India, every organization has become very, very cost sensitive. And, while they concentrate on optimizing their cost to affect business on a positive note, what happens is what we let go are these finer experiences that we could have given to a prospective candidate had we got liberal hands. So the great experience that Mr. Sridhar was talking about way back when he joined is a luxury now. You would not find even a single organization in India who would have, other than the management trainee program, which is where a lot of funds are
That is
devoted to.
that is after you have joined. This is what
Right.
is talking about
But
the selection itself.
correct. So
Three-day
there would be
process.
hardly any organization in India who would even, think on those lines. Forget executing that. And post COVID, to cut off your travel expenses, make things easier, adapt technology, You've lost the human touch. You don't even meet the candidate in person before taking a call. It's just a matter of a half an hour, half an hour interaction over a Zoom call or maybe a MS Teams call, and your decision is taken. And probably one of the reasons why this decision which is taken over, a period of 30 minutes discussion, many a times doesn't stay to be very fruitful to the organization and neither to the candidate, and then it dismantles over a very short period of time, adding up to your attrition. So average attrition these days, industry agnostic, would be about 20%, 18 to 20%. And if an organization is within this range, the HR team is more than happy. So we have compromised with the situation to an extent that we are okay to let go, and we are okay to engage our hiring specialists to get another piece of talent to keep on the ball rolling. So that's how it is.
Yeah, that's also
Absolutely. And Binayak, if I may also put in my bit here, I'm thinking of my Tata Steel days, right? So on joining the company and experiencing the MT program, you know, they took a lot of care, right, to induct us. So one is, of course, candidate experience. The other thing is how you venture into the organization, how you're treated, how you're uplifted, right? So they took us through programs about the business, about you know how to interact with your senior officers, how to socialize, the larger picture, which sort of doesn't exist now. So what the very definition of association with a firm has also changed, right? For a lot of people now, it's just punch in and punch out. And why should I have a relationship with the company? Why should there be a story to tell? You know, but I feel that largely the entire ecosystem is losing out because of this mindset. You know, so to build a brand, there's got to be more interaction. There's got to be more stories. There've got to be profound experiences. It can't happen over a tele interview and then a cohort joining in which you're one amongst a lot of people and you don't really get to interact with your leadership. It's bridged basically. So funnily, uh, in the evolution of things, again agreeing with Sridhar and Kasturi both, in the evolution of things, I think some of the things that we used to do before have been lost, but they are valuable. The things that we lost.
great. So I think we have some time for if there is any audience question or any other point anyone wants to make from the speakers or from the audience. I think the floor is open now. So anyone has any queries, you can raise with any of us. It was wonderful, actually, though we digress from actual candidate experience into more finer area of engagement, more finer area on employee engagement part. So, acha, so there is a question from Chandan. What are the strategy on employer branding for the MSME industry? Chandan, do you want any specific person to answer it, or any of the speakers can take it up? Chandan? Okay, so the question is on MSME industries, employer branding in MSME industries. Who wants to take it?
Yeah. So some post, what do you call, post ITC, interacted with a few MSMEs.
Okay.
See, the MSME brand is really centering around the care and concern that the owner of the company shows towards his or her employees. So MSMEs by definition, I'm talking about the small ones and the micro ones. Medium probably will have more employees, but despite that, it's the personal contact and the personal relationship or personal knowledge that they have. That is one, certainly. Second is, I think the brand is centered around the kind of opportunities that the owner provides to the employees to do the job. For example, that, the trust that is placed on the employee, and not being continuously monitored or supervised. So employees feel happy that the owner trusts them fully. That's the second bit I noticed, that there's plenty of trust absent in large companies. So so these two, and also some companies, small companies, make it a point to provide opportunities for the employee to learn. Say, for example, go for a course, evening course, or online course, etc., etc. So they want that person to grow, to acquire more knowledge, more skills, etc. So this three, the personal relationship, the trust, and the focus on development, these three constitute the important elements of the employer brand in the small company context.
Absolutely. Totally agree with you, Sridhar. And in fact, I've seen it in my company as well. That personal touch is very, very important when you're smaller. And you obviously can't offer the brand and the glory that a lot of larger firms can offer. But you can be creative, to answer the question that Chandan asked. That if you're MSME, you'll have to think creatively. I see a lot of startups that I consult with also. And, it is kind of difficult for them to compete with a larger organization, but they've come up with a lot of creative ways in which they can offer value to the employee. It could be many things. It could be the stuff that Sridhar was talking about. It could be, as simple as selling them the dream that the owner has and the affirmation that, the organization is going to go somewhere and you're going to be somebody in it because you're part of the, seeding team, basically. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, coming from a family where most of my entire set of cousins are into their own businesses, and most of them in manufacturing. And I've seen the same thing. There are people who have stayed for the lifetimes. And one big thing is that they feel they're part of the family. They know that these people are there, they take care of me in times of need. One, any life event that happens, my owner has something to do with it. He helps, he gives advices, he provides that help. And therefore, that is more of a very personal touch. And that is something which definitely large organizations, it's very difficult to build in a large organization because there's no owner actually. Even the owner who's maybe there are too many rules, guidelines, fear of creating precedences that if I do this for this person, then the next person will come in line. All these questions come into things where it is not possible. But in smaller organization, definitely a very customized, personalized approach can be taken by the owner for each and every individual. I think that has.
I think one word of caution here for any startup kind of an organization is we've seen commitments not being honored. So that is something that has to be a big watch out, because that is going to be extremely detrimental to your employer brand. So whatever you commit in whatever form, I mean, there has to be heart and soul into honoring that commitment.
Yeah, there has been, especially the news, there are some of the new startups, there has been scenarios where, the employee, the basic commitments were not made. And that obviously had an impact on their employment brand as well as in their own business brand itself. There are
Absolutely.
several examples. So Chandan, the answer is satisfied you?
Hello.
Yeah, Chandan. The answer that you got was satisfactory?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Thank you, sir.
thanks. Any other thoughts, questions from any of the audience?
Vinayak, this is Partha this side. How are you?
I'm fine. Tell me, Partha.
See, I have one observation. I've gone through this full interactions process that has been going on. In one point, like you said, like you have seen employees who have seen lifelong. Now, this lifelong concept, I think, is a bit redundant because the more you stay with a private organization, the more exploited you get. And there, even the HR person, maybe he becomes a puppet of the management. So change is inevitable, which I think maybe after maybe 1 year, 2 year. If in my case, if you see, uh, I have been into many industries. I've been into jewelry for what 8 years, 8 9 years. Then into the packaging industry for now the 15 years now. Of which 13 years I have spent in my previous organization in SL. But what I found is the morality is degrading. Even the HR team, they are not able to cope up with what the management is thinking. Now, how can that erosion be plugged in? I mean, anybody can how that erosion can be plugged in. I mean, this is my question maybe.
So you're saying that the confidence of employees towards their employers is something which is getting eroded. They don't feel that. So when I join an organization, I know that, okay, I'm going to be there for a short time only. Because I don't have a hard and fast thing that we need to stay for the organization. So while you're talking about the lifetime employment, I would say that Mr. Sridhar, his predecessor, Mr. Anand Naik, both of them have been lifetime HR heads in ITC. And there are a lot of senior leadership in ITC who have started as interns and have become the senior leadership in their in the organization. And so
No, in a way, it is good. But I
no,
think the
no,
exploitation
your concern
of
is
the
genuine. So I am saying that yes,
yeah.
there are examples, but yes, what you are saying that, and as Sridhar sir was also saying that slowly that process is getting eroded, and
Yeah.
that bond that employer and employee used to have in large organizations are getting more difficult. In smaller organizations, it is still there, and the
No, Vinayak. In fact, Vinayak, I have been into this Tata mode of things also.
Mhm.
The exploitation part is getting a bit more than what it should have been, because see, I was the senior person over in Tata, where I was the sole decision maker here in the eastern region for the outsourcing part. Then I was transferred to Husor, and they said you will be, because you are an employee of the Kolkata region, and your perks and everything will be the same. I mean, that what irked me. Then I had to leave Tata. Even an employer like Tata, their morality is degrading. I mean, this has to be taken care of by the HR fraternity who are there. Uh, that is what my concern is.
and there was no one to hear your concern or no one to do
Yes,
anything about it. Yeah, point is
yes,
genuine.
yes.
Yeah, these situations when it comes obviously impact individual employees. Uh, what exactly is the context in which this thing was taken? I have not privy to that information. Some of the times, one of the things uh, which I have seen is that which is there is always this fear that if I do an exception for this employee, will this become a precedent? Will this become a policy? So this is one concern which I have faced, and this is one concern which I have been always dealing with, is that if I'm always thinking of creating precedents, how am I serving genuine people concerns? That becomes a point. But yeah, what you narrated, yes, that definitely is something which should not have happened. But really, we don't understand which context in which this happened.
On top of that, Binayak, one thing I would just like to add here is, the entire talent dynamics has changed over the years. While even today you would find a percentage of people who would retire from the same organization, but the majority takes a decision to experience different organizations, experience different cultures, and there's no harm about it. It's a way that an individual takes a call about his or her own career, and it's absolutely fine. Instead of having disengaged employees in the organization just for the sake of the brand, just for the sake of being loyal to the organization, or maybe just carrying on, it is always better that you take up new challenges, you move on, and you add a lot of value to your own professional self. And just taking up the cue from what Mr. Partha was saying, if organizations can have an employee grievance cell which can at least hear out these grievances from the employees, so there has to be a free flow of communication, and it has to be a two-way communication. There are certain queries to which there are no answers, and we'll have to live
Absolutely.
with that. But
Absolutely.
at least if 80% of those queries are answered, then it adds a lot of value. And tech here has taken over, and there are a lot of technology solutions which are being adapted by current organizations in giving the candidate or giving the employees a kind of a grievance voicing out possibility, which has a quick turnaround time, which has a personal touch. And of course, there are apex grievance committees, which probably every standard organization these days are very, very dedicated to hear at least what their employees have to say. Um, so I think that way, at least a part of this concern that Partha raised would be addressed.
At least someone would be there to listen to the problem.
Absolutely,
Listen
absolutely,
to
and
the
you
employee's
feel
point of view.
valued. If even if you do not get a solution, you have a person to vent out. You have a person to whom you can at least share. So that in itself is something which adds a lot of value to. There's a lot of human touch to the entire process.
Okay, so Shomit has come up with an observation on brand image is shaped by the top management team of the day. So they are the ones who are driving the culture. If an experienced employee from outside joins, then they have to count out to the management way of thinking and is not able to provide insight suggestions, which is absolutely true. If you come in and you don't feel wanted and you are not able to put forward your point of view, that becomes a big challenge. Thanks for this observation, Shomit. Another very important, I just wanted a small lay, is that what has happened. This was a study which was conducted in US. Is that this generation, again, this question of Gen Z and Gen Alpha and all these, is that there was this question that they do not have much of loyalty towards organization. They don't feel that organizations can that bonding that their parents had, that they stay long in an organization. All these things come up. One of the reasons which was there is that they saw their parents growing up. And they saw that how their parents were treated in organization. They saw the late nights. They experienced the stress and tension people went through in their jobs. And therefore, they do not consider big organizations as something uh, you know, which can be a part of your family, or which can be something which is a value-adding thing. They see it as a transactional piece. It's another person with whom I have to deal, another entity which I have to deal, they will pay me money and I'll give it work. That concept of, being part of the organization is a family, is lost on the second generation because they've seen their parents, they've seen the way they have gone through, the problems they have faced with big organization, and therefore they do not have the trust that the organization is going to treat me as an employee, or there would be certain ways, if I am in a bad situation, this organization will take care of me. That trust is lost. And so that's a feedback. And therefore, the next in subsequent generations, engaging people will be very difficult, because as and when we have, because as children, they are seeing parents, and if their parents are not very engaged, if the earlier generation was not engaged, or there was a lot of stress, lot of work stress, lot of other problems related to employment, obviously the next generation is not very confident of having employment or staying in an organization for long. Great. Any other thoughts, questions which we have? We've already overshot our time, but if there is anything, please put forward. We will then discuss that. Yeah, Partho, one of the reasons was this. Yeah, so Gen Z has clear personal background, less of organization loyalty. One of the reasons, as I said, was because they've seen their parents. They've seen their
And
parents.
they also have a lot of options.
Yeah.
So the number of options which is available these days, I believe their parents wouldn't have had that opportunity.
Right. Got it.
And the approach is also very eclectic. They have a mixture of so many streams of information coming in. So, I mean, the world is their oyster types.
Yeah, absolutely. They are I would say they are a more evolved species than we were.
Yes. We used to take a lot of things for granted.
We started to use computers and internet when we were, we've crossed our teens, at least for me. These people are born into it. So if I look at my son or my son, they cannot imagine a world where there was no internet or there was no mobile phones and everything. So there's a very, very different species, more evolved species, because they have their priorities much clearer than what perhaps we had in our times. Great. So I think there are no more questions or observations. It was an absolutely great session. Yes, we digressed from candidate experience to employer brand and employee experience and engagement. Various topics were touched. And it was wonderful to have you here, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Binayak. Thank you, Kasturi. Thank you, Indrajit.
Thanks, Kasturi.
All the
Pleasure
others.
is all ours.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely, our pleasure.
Thanks a lot. So let's call it a day. It was absolutely wonderful. What I'm doing is it's already recorded. This would be put up in the YouTube channel. I will share the links with you all so that you can share it with people who you want.
Thanks to all the subject matter experts and Vinayak. As always, wonderful moderation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shomit.
Thank you.
Bye then.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night to all of you.
Good night.
Good night.